I don't know if anyone else has ever struggled with this verse, but this morning while I was reading Proverbs 22, verse 6, I found myself seeing it a little differently. It says, train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. You see, I've read this verse so many times, but this morning I paused and asked myself, have I been putting a weight on this verse that it was never meant to carry? Because I think many of us, especially as mothers, we read it as a guarantee. If I raise my child well, they'll never stray. But you see, Proverbs are wisdom principles, not unconditional promises. They describe what is generally true in a world where people still have free will. And that was so freeing to me. Proverbs 22 verse 6 isn't telling us that our child's entire future rests on our shoulders. It's reminding us to faithfully do our part. God never asked us to control the outcome. He asked us to be faithful in the process, right? Then I found myself slowing down and really looking at the verse, phrase by phrase. It says train up. Notice it doesn't say control or force or perfect a child. Training takes time, repetition, patience. There are good days and there are frustrating days. Athletes don't become disciplined after one training session, and children don't either. And as I sat with those words, another thought came to me. What if training a child actually begins with God training the parent? You see, I spent so much time thinking about what I should be teaching my children, prayer, kindness, honesty, generosity, a love for God's word. But then I stopped and asked myself, am I living those things? Because the truth is, our children are watching us far more than they're listening to us, right? They notice how we respond when we're under pressure. They notice whether we turn to God when life gets hard. They notice whether we ask for forgiveness when we are wrong. They notice whether our faith is something we practice every day or just something that we talk about. Perhaps one of the greatest gifts we can give our children isn't trying to be perfect. It's allowing God to keep changing us as parents. He teaches us patience. Our children experience patience. He teaches us to trust him. Our children see what it looks like to trust. And he teaches us to love his word. They grow up seeing that his word matters. See, maybe that's where training really begins, not with trying to shape our children into these perfect people, but by allowing God to shape us into faithful parents, And then a child isn't a blank robot waiting to be programmed, it's a little person with their own personality, questions, emotions, and eventually choices of their own. And sometimes faithful parenting means adjusting our approach because every child is different in the way that he should go. I was reading that some scholars understand this as training a child according to the path that is fitting for them, their stage of development, temperament, and God-given design, not simply expecting every child to respond in exactly the same way. That requires wisdom on our part more than perfection, And when he is old, he will not depart from it. This is where I think many mothers carry guilt. I've heard parents saying, my teenager is struggling, my idol child has walked away from church, I must have failed. But the proverb isn't saying that a faithful parent can remove a child's freedom to choose. Even God, the perfect father, has children who reject him, and that doesn't make him a failure. Likewise, a child's choices are not always a measure of a mother's faithfulness. If you're praying, showing up, apologizing when you're wrong, teaching God's word, loving your children consistently, and pointing them to Christ, you are doing holy work, even if you can't yet see the fruit. Some seeds take years to break through the ground. Your job is to plant and water, and God is the one who gives the growth. So mothers, keep going, keep praying for your children, keep teaching them, keep correcting them with love, and keep apologizing when you get it wrong. Keep showing your children what it looks like to walk with God, not perfectly, but faithfully so. You are not responsible for controlling every choice they will ever make. You are responsible for planting the seeds and creating the foundation and pointing them towards Christ. And even when you cannot see the fruit yet, trust that God is still working and your faithfulness matters. Your prayers matter. The quiet things you do every single day, they matter, So don't allow guilt to convince you that you have failed simply because the journey doesn't look the way you imagined it would. Keep training your children, keep trusting in God, keep loving them, and leave the outcome in God's hands, because perhaps the greatest way we train our children isn't simply by telling them the way that they should go. It's by walking that way ourselves as God continues to train us. See, God is faithful. He really is. Okay. That's all for me now. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope this was an encouragement to you. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.